Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Committee of the Whole of January 10th at 1 p.m. I'll call the meeting to order. Any concerns, council, conflicts? Hearing and seeing none. Note that Councillor Inkster is not with us as yet. Agenda, fairly simple agenda. Any amendments or additions to this meeting? Not a motion to adopt. All in favor? Carried. Without further ado, we'll go to, I believe, Director Douglas to introduce 4.1 and then give it to the people who are.
Thank you, Your Worship. Hello.
Yep.
Okay, the last time we met, we were given further instructions to work on a couple of items. One is to try to break out the hiring of additional staff further into the year and to review any budget cost savings possible. The report goes through an analysis of some of the cost savings as well as pushing the positions out. But I have a PowerPoint that I'll kind of walk us through to kind of get to the same ending here. Okay, so we also have a little bit of new information that I'd like to provide to council as well. So this was kind of where we were at the last meeting. We've been through this slide before. I just want to kind of set where we are and where we're going. So this would be the full ask for all the additional operating requests and the 3% for capital. A 1% tax increase here equals 126,864. So also over Christmas break, we've got the first viewing of our tax roll for 2024. The good news is that the new construction number calculated by staff is about 160,000 versus the 66 we were carrying before. So we should be seeing an increase of $94,000 of new taxation to our system, to our revenues. And so I've just done the same analysis as in the previous slides, but with the new information. Just hang on a sec. Yeah, so we've done similar analysis. So now we're looking at we would be sitting at 11.37% under the previous slides, knowing that we're getting an additional $94,000. However, with the new construction number going up, that means a 1% tax increase is a different number now. So a 1% tax increase would equal 127,808, although that's not a huge change. I did the same calculations based on the greater base amount for a 1% tax increase. Additionally, in the report, we've identified about $95,000 worth of savings. So now this analysis carries those two new bits of information. And so in this scenario, we'd be looking at a 10.64% tax increase. So further to that, what we're saying is option 2 is now we're going to incorporate pushing the hires into the year further. And so that's where this analysis starts. So now the first component was just adding the 2 bits of cost savings and new revenue sources. And then this analysis draws in the reduction of additional operating requests. So once again, we've seen this list just a second ago prior. And so if we push out the hires a little further into the year with all the new information, You're looking at a 5.48% tax increase plus a 3% for capital. That's with the new 1% number of 127,808. Any comments or questions?
Maybe just to frame it, so you're gonna go through this and then we're going to hear from Ms. Johnson.
She would be the next report.
Okay, so we're.
Yep. So we're trying to deal with operations first.
Mhm. Which is
And-
all you.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then we'll move on to the second report.
Council. You know, please, Mr. Rowe.
Thanks. Thank you for doing this work. I guess one of my questions is reduction to planning expenses, like what does that mean? Is that what does that mean for the planning department? Like what kind of expenses are we? Looking
Okay,
at-
so we have approximately $100,000 there for some of the OCP work and other things that planning are doing. And just recently we received word on a $200,000 grant that we got. So the 200 grand will cover that 30,000, and we're just going to draw over the 100, and knowing that that grant will cover 30 of the already planned expenditures there.
And I guess my other question is around small paving works for $10,000. That feels like it's probably 2 square feet of paving. I don't know. Like, what is that actually?
Yeah, so that comes from an operating fund, which like is kind of dedicated to potholes and other smaller type work. And I think this year we'd only spent 17 of a $50,000 budget. So
Okay.
we felt that we could reduce that by a small amount.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Others, folks? Yes, Councillor McLaughlin and then Councillor Bell.
Yes, thank you to the chair. I'm just wondering if we could get a bit of a, if there is one, explanation how the capital budget relates to, in terms of work, amount of work and projects we take on in the capital budget, how that relates to our operating costs. Because of course, implementing capital projects takes a lot of administrative time and effort. Thank you.
Okay, I was about to say that's capital is later, but you brought it back into operating, which, yeah, good question.
Yes, certainly we have a number of staff that are hired to do capital works. They're all budgeted in the operating budget. And so we're not asking for any additional staff. I think there's 3 or 4 staff that, deal with project work. And so it's covered off in operating. So whether we do $2.5 million or $5.5 million of capital, there's no additional or less staff expected. I don't know if that answers your question.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting accounting philosophy of, do you attribute the cost of the people doing work on capital to the capital projects, or do you absorb them within operations? But I don't propose to get into that discussion. Councillor Bell? Oh, yep.
Thank you through the chair. If I just comment on that, I guess, if you approve a lot of capital projects, like 5 times what you might otherwise, it does have an impact. I mean, it's all about the service we provide and our priorities, I think. So, and if the staff are overburdened with a lot of projects, then they come back year after year asking for more staff. So I'm just saying, like, for clarification, that's sort of what happens. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes, I agree.
Councillor Bell?
Chair, just a quick clarification. So 8.48% plus the 3%,
Yes.
or
No.
included?
Included.
Okay.
Yep, so it's 5.48 for operations and then 3% for the
That's what
capital.
I think.
Please, Counselor Toth.
Thank you. I personally, I'm perfectly happy with the number where it's sitting right now as presented. I do struggle a little bit with the proposal to hire 2 parks maintenance positions in 1 year. When part of hiring one is being able to free up the casual support money again for casual support when we need it. So I don't know how the rest of council feels about it. But I wonder if it would be worth deferring parks maintenance to 2025. Thanks.
We've got eager responses, please.
I'm not sure that it was a question, but thank you for the opportunity to speak to this. So through the chair, I just wanted to mention that this will mean that there is no increase in service level from parks because we are using that with that first one as a, it's for the last 2 years, we've been using it as a full-time position. So there's been a lot of pushback from the public on our fields and our delivery with the irrigation in the fields in particular. As well as just regular parks service delivery. So they are currently overworked and this would allow for 1 extra position because the one that I'm asking you to approve for the first parks maintenance position is already being used and has been for the last 2 years.
Please, yes.
Perhaps I see some clarity then, because my understanding is that the one that we have had for the last 2 years is being paid for by casual support contract, like somewhere there is funding being provided for that casual support that's turned into a full-time. So parks maintenance position 1 would allocate funding for that to be a permanent position, which should free up that part-time casual support funding again. So if we hire the second position, we're actually hiring 2 people and fully freeing up the on-call casual funding, I guess is my question.
Thank you for the question. That is, and the clarification. So yes, I hear what you're saying. We have been trying to fund it with different pots of money. So we have been out staff in other areas as well. And so we have been in the last 5 months been able to do this full time and also used our park summer student money to do that. And so, like I said, this is mostly about burnout for this role so that we can attribute that 1 position to a full-time parks laborer and then increase service delivery with the second. So the position for me of what I'm proposing is that if you'd like to increase the service delivery, that would be adding the position. If we remain status quo, that would be giving the 1 FTE to the first parks maintenance position. And it would free up casual money, but it also means that the casual pool money would be used in other divisions as well. And that this person, the parks maintenance 1, would receive benefits and be a full-time employee.
So I think, if we do 1, we free up the casual. And if we do 2, we increase the service. Counselor Rowe.
Yeah, that makes sense to me in that I'm in support of that. Just given the increasing demand on parks department outside of 10 years ago, what parks would have been doing. I would be really interested though, going forward to find some way to be able to attribute what percentage of their work is actually around community safety and issues that occur as related to the unhoused and the issues and not just the unhoused, but the issues we're having with graffiti and all that sort of stuff. My question, just for learning, does a casual pool sit within the service or the department? So like, do you have a casual pool under your umbrella that you can use for any of the departments under your umbrella, or is it specific to?
Thank you for the question. Through the chair, so we are working towards having a casual pool in all divisions. I believe in that as an ability to provide the public with more quick, ready, available staff when we are down a staff person, whether it's vacation or sick time, et cetera. For funding allocation, we are currently using the method of when we have, say, a vacancy in one division, then that goes, we would talk to finance and talk about how much money that is providing the district and then using that for our casual funding. We do not have a casual pool of funding for things like parks.
Okay, but the first part of your question, did you get the answer to the first part of your question?
It wasn't so much as a question as a comment, because I don't necessarily know what the answer is to that, and I don't want it to be a big make work project. But your thoughts?
Thank you. Through the chair, I would be happy to get you, I believe I could get you a percentage by the end of this meeting. But I would like to say how drastically this has increased in the last 3 years, I would say, certainly in the time that I have been here. But when I first started, they didn't used to have a needle count in their in the parks lunchroom, and that is a thing that they now have in the office, and they are tracking that. So there is between that and the facility maintenance and public works, that has been a huge increase for everybody. Thank you.
I certainly want to echo that, that we need to get a grip and start measuring that explicitly, because we've got to start issuing invoices. Other questions, folks? For me, Mr. Douglas, that's whether we drag any of these positions a few months here or there, what's the impact next year on the taxes?
Yeah, there'll be an impact for next year. Of course, on the first position, there won't be a further impact. But the other three, there would be a 6-month impact for one of the positions and 4 months each for the following
Right.
2.
But I guess the question is, we're in a sense, whatever we decide with this council, we're baking that increase into next year.
That's correct.
So at a guess, I'd say it's over 4%.
Well, you'd be for the one position, the 6-month position be another 48,000 next year additional. And then for I'm just gonna lump the next 2 together, but you'd be talking probably about 30, close to 30,000 for those each. So 60,
No, no,
1%.
Perhaps it's about 2% more than this, so it's about 4% total that we're baking in now for next year. 1.86 now, but that increase plus the full year for the other.
Yeah,
these
about
positions.
I'm gonna say another 1%. I
No,
don't think
No,
more.
I don't agree. 2.
Okay.
We got 0.6 on the engineering technologists, 0.5 on the parks maintenance 2, and 0.6 or 7 on public works 1. So. Oh, apologies, my logic's wrong. Still don't have it. Go ahead, Councilor Rose.
So just so I understand, math, not my strong point unless it involves handing out medications, of course. What we approve now, that piece does not count as a tax increase in 2025. Just the other 6 months of the 6-month position,
That's correct.
right?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
But we're paying that extra, the 250,000 we're being asked to approve for this year. Obviously, we're paying for it next year, plus another 100,000 or something.
Okay, so the same logic then you could use for the infrastructure increase, right? So it's, 3% this year. It's gonna be that 3% next year, plus potentially, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, please, Councilor McLaughlin.
Yes, thank you for the chair. Yeah, these things do accumulate and add up. Once you give them, it's hard to take them away. But I was thinking in terms of, for instance, engineering technologist, if people want to inquire about putting in a suite or a auxiliary dwelling, that takes up their time. And if we're trying to promote that from a planning point of view, we need to have the staffing to help support that. I know because I talked to one myself about it. I thought, this is quite an undertaking. It takes a lot of time to plan this and organize it. So I think some of these positions can actually help us achieve some of our objectives, strategic objectives beyond kind of the status quo that we have. So, thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Bell?
Through the chair, a comment as well, just around, I recall in our last discussion that a lot of this is built based on building bench strength, my mouth isn't working today as well. And I know that that's an important part of your component and goal. Is that correct? As we look forward in terms of some of the needs of the staff?
Yes, we, these are the positions we identified that we're needing more assistance in that area.
I'm also comfortable with this number, and appreciate the work that's gone into this to bring these numbers down. And I think they look very, well, not always reasonable, but I'm comfortable with this number. And I'm also comfortable with these staff positions because I do feel that the park staff are doing more than they used to do. And I think that, as you say, I've heard this from other parks people in other municipalities, that their work is a lot more challenging. And so I think that this is an important look at what we need right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, then perhaps we can move to, there's no more questions on the pages 3 and 4. Oh, there was one. When we're saying reduce council contingency at the bottom of page 3, I'm curious, what does that leave?
70, council, 15,000.
Thanks. Anything on page 4, council? Page 5, lovely spreadsheet. In the one that I had highlighted is under the medium priority, the Davis Bay Wharf archaeology. Can you remind me what that's?
As part of our lease agreement, we have we went for a longer term lease and they limited our lease to 5 years. And within that 5-year span, we have 4 reports that we have to do for that leased area. And one of them is the one you're suggesting there. So we're suggesting to do 2 of the 4 reports this year. We're already a year into the lease, so we're into year 2 or 2.5. So we essentially have another 2.5 years to complete the requirements of the lease.
Everybody following that? Everybody know who the lease is with? Yes, Councillor Tom.
Thank you. So we had a 5-year lease in order that the province came back with in order to, get these reports done, things like that. Has the province indicated that, if we get these reports done, when it comes up for renewal, that we're actually going to be eligible for a longer term lease? Because I'd hate for them to come back in 3.5 years and say, thanks for those 4 reports. We now want you to
You're out.
do these 4 reports and we're going to give you another 5 years to complete it. Or are we actually going to get ahead of it at some point? Thanks.
Great question, Councillor. We're assuming that will be what we have to provide. Or it's certainly indicated in the letter that we received that, any further tenure would be required. Like, they would need to know the outcome of these reports.
Yes.
It wasn't quite the question. The question was, if we get these 4 reports done, do we expect any hesitation from the province to giving us a 10 or 15 or 20-year lease? Thanks.
Sorry, I kind of left it a little open. Because honestly, I don't know, but I've never seen them not, once you provide the required information, then we can go forward.
Yeah, I mean, it says Davis Bay Wharf, but it could read Davis Bay Dock. 4-letter word. So I'm not sure that we should be, I think Councillor Toss' question is a good one. That Are we doing all this work and at the end they'll say, thanks for that, we're not even gonna give you an extension.
At this point, assume you're talking about the dock management plan and its expansion. Dock management plan is not intended to apply to infrastructure that's owned by government or operated by government.
At this stage.
Sure, at this stage, but we don't know what anything's gonna look like in 10 years or, 20 years ago, we couldn't have known we'd be here today.
Thank you. Okay, anything else on that page? Other notes there, Councilman McLaughlin? Nope.
Because, to help pay for planning, et cetera. Can't recall, I know I read about it, but
That was our share of the $52 million that the province is distributing to municipalities and regional districts. And it's based on population. And so our share to be arriving later this month is around $200,000. And it's to implement Bill 44 to start on the housing needs report updates, the OCP updates, land use decisions that can help and support housing.
right, so what is it called? And was it something that we put in our budget, or is it when we get a new grant out of the blue, which is a great gift, I guess? Do we then add that to our budget? Cause we just heard about this, so it's not in the budget. So how do we?
It will be
accommodate
added to
that?
version 2 of the budget.
So likewise, we haven't got any money from the Housing Accelerator Fund. And here, a big part of our budget is $500,000 for that. So I wonder why, in a way, we have got a placeholder for that. When maybe if we didn't have a placeholder and we wait and see, we could reduce these numbers, and not have these huge amounts that are quite speculative, I think. Thank you.
So one is an application we had to make. We went to council and got an authorization to make that application. Once we do that, if we're at this time in the budget, we always add it to the budget. The other one came to us without application, so it was just an announcement. It came to us since we did version 1 of the budget, but will be added to version 2 of the budget and in the 5-year financial plan.
So is there a legal requirement to include that, or is that just our practice? Thank you.
That's our practice.
I guess the key thing is it goes to staff utilization. I mean, we're anticipating getting the grant, but we have to have the staff to actually do the work. That'd be that's part of why it's included. If we weren't doing that work, we might not need as many staff.
Right, but we
Yeah.
just said we don't really hire much staff with capital projects.
No, I think we said we have staff for capital projects. Yeah, already, but yeah, and well, that's a really interesting question. If we don't get the grants at all, we can't, can't afford to have the people do work because we don't have the money to do the work. So, yeah, that's sick. But,
Yeah, and
Councillor, Director Douglas, do you want to comment on that?
yeah, I mean, I'm just discussing this, and so for education, for me and for the public, I'm not saying that what you're doing is wrong or I don't agree, but I would like to keep the numbers down and add it later if possible. And I think we have a lot of projects where we have a lot of speculative money just because of the times we're in and the way the money's flying for housing and such. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think, correct me, but if none of this will involve a change in the increase in the taxes that we're discussing. Right, if we don't get the grant, and this is my question, if we don't get the grant, or in some cases it's partial grant, partial other reserves, what happens if we don't get, take one where we got $100,000 of operating reserves, and $100,000 grant. If we don't get the grant, we don't do any of it?
Typically, we don't do any of it.
Right.
However, in our capital plan, we do have one project like that we can do the 100 from the capital reserve. But we just won't do it as extensive if we don't get the grant portion. But generally, if we're doing a road under a grant and we don't get the grant, we won't do any of the road.
Right.
Yeah.
Even if it's only partially grant funded.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the case that's in our capital plan is for parks, we've got $100,000 from capital reserve and 175 from the grant. We can separate those two, meaning we can still do the 100 grand in the parks. It's enhancements to Hackett Park,
Mhm.
playground, not a problem, but we wouldn't do the full
Right.
expected amount.
And where it's 100% grant, then it's pretty clear. You don't get the grant, you don't do it. So. Yes.
Yeah, if I
please.
could follow up with that. Thank you. Yeah, that is my concern. For instance, the housing accelerator, we have the idea of perhaps buying a property or something. And I wouldn't want to see us having to switch over to grants and reserves, other grants and reserves, because that other fund didn't come through. So I think it's important, the principle you just say, that if that money doesn't come through, like it's kind of not gonna happen. But unfortunately, I fear that will happen. Thank you.
Well, it could happen, but then staff would have to come back to us for approval to use a different pot of money. Ed, Counselor Shepherd.
In terms of the additional asks here, I'm generally in support of what's being pared down to. One thing, if I could ask Director Douglas on, it's something that I think was dropped off the initial list, the first go around. We had, and thanks to Councillor McLaughlin for this, Cover the Coast. We had a place set for, I think it was initially $40,000, but the town's or district's component of it would have been 10 for their study of land options, if you will, in the district for social housing. And I don't see it on this list. And I'm just wondering if anyone can recall why it was dropped off, if we thought that funding was coming from somewhere else or a grant or. Please.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
Who would like to take this on, Mr. Allen?
I can attempt to answer this question dating back to August when we set our action items or priorities for the Housing Accelerator Fund. We had that in as one of our action items, the land inventory, to essentially do it on our own. But per the previous comments, it wouldn't happen unless we got the Housing Accelerator Fund. And then the housing coordinator then went on and provided this other opportunity to do so, which would require us to contribute on shared regional approach. So basically, it's just evolved over the past 6 months while we wait for budget, while we wait for various grants, and the $200,000 from the province for Bill 44 implementation could possibly be a source of that 10,000 while we continue to wait for the Housing Accelerator Fund. The Housing Accelerator Fund comes in the meantime, then we're set there as well.
Okay, but maybe if I could, then the question is, if none of those monies come in, are we going to fund our share of the Cover the Coast? That's not in our operating budget at this point.
It's not in the operating budget, but I think what Director Allen is saying is that with the $200,000 of the recent grant, that it could be, and I guess I'll just leave with staff that I'd certainly love to have that placed as a priority for part of that $200,000.
Okay, great. All right. So this is before us for information, and with our, unless I guess it's a negative thing, unless we have fundamental disagreements, it'll be included in the financial plan.
I think I have a motion there that I would like.
The recommendation is
Yeah.
to include it in the financial plan. That's what I just said. So, yes. So you want to make that motion, Councillor Rowe?
I'll move recommendation 1
Thank
as
you.
presented.
Right, seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. So then go to capital here.
Hang on,
Whoops.
not
hang on,
quite yet.
Hang on.
So could you put my PowerPoint back up?
By the way, can we make sure we post these PowerPoints on the website?
Yes.
I think they're would be
Absolutely.
good if they could be up even the morning of the meeting. A lot of data. And I'd also observe you're looking very sunny, all of you on camera right now. Sunshine right on the camera.
Okay, so that's the general operating fund, and now we have some information, additional information on the sewer operating fund. So once again, we had provided a original budget, which is which I believe this was in the budget book at this point, except for the moving some of the public works staff time over to the sewer fund. And so this slide provides that information where we're kind of sliding $78,000 from public works over to the sewer operating fund to help with collection work that needs to be done. And so what that does is it just changes slightly the amount of percent of increase that we would want to increase fees by, which is 3.69%. What that does, what the effect is on a residential property. Our fees currently are $655. 3.69% would increase that to $679 per household. And then I've included one of the commercial rates. It would go from $13.80 to $14.31.
Please, Councillor Top.
I just wanted to comment that it looks like the sewer fees are finally in a point where we might actually be able to beat inflation.
Last year, we talked about putting or making sure that the rest of the district's operations pay into the sewer fund like a user. So how much is in this year's budget for that?
Could you re-ask the question again?
As a user, you know, this building, for example, has the benefit of of sewer. And we haven't been actually paying the sewer fund for those services in years past.
On this building here
Yes, and
other municipal buildings, so we
and-
do that.
yeah. No, last year it was a,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep, we'll look at that. Actually,
Please,
if we haven't been doing that, we'll do that. Yeah.
thank you. Oh, there historically, you know, we're charging appropriately the sewer for work done by parks people. But equally, if another section of the district is using, getting the benefit of a sewer connection, they should be paying. And that hasn't happened in years gone by, so.
It's essentially an internal charge
Yeah.
on our own buildings.
Right.
For the use of, you know, sewer.
Okay. Anything else on this?
We'll go to septage and then maybe look for a motion after that. So what we've been doing the last couple of years is whatever we do to sewage rates, we then do the same to septage rates. So we'd be recommending a 3.69% increase to the septage rates as well. What that looks like, so we would be going from 0.59 cents per gallon to 0.61 cents per gallon on unloading fees. I did make comment there that septage revenues continue to either decline or, you know, just are floating in at a, you know, level that's, you know, we need to look at it and, you know, I've just put a couple of thoughts out there that, we need to maybe look at a regional strategy for, being able to charge, properties for the usage of the septic receiving station, across the coast, not just, not in, we don't charge Seashell, but we would want it widespread. Or consider other options with regards to the facility.
Yes, please, Counselor.
Thank you. I know that in years past, there's been the talk of the parcel tax, which I've voiced my opposition to because it's only paid by Seashell users. It doesn't have, we can't charge it to Half Moon Bay residents, for example. So I appreciate, the consideration of a regional strategy or terminating of the service. I look forward to the septic future plan next presentation. I'm glad that the parcel tax for septic is not on the table for this year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Counselor Bell.
Through the chair, based on Councillor Toss' comment about the septic plan, when is that? Where is that in the plan in terms of what we're gonna do with that?
Director Dillon.
Yeah, thank you for the question through the chair to Councillor Bell. So your question is, when is the septic plan going to be completed?
Yeah.
Okay.
if we're ju- I know we're starting it, we're
that's
doing it in a process, so.
Yeah, so it'll be a year-long process. I think at this moment, we're in stakeholder engagement. We gave the first presentation just before the Christmas break, and we'll be doing more work throughout the year. And part of that would be looking at cost recovery mechanisms, because the presentation was quite clear that we're kind of into a money losing situation on that facility. So yeah, definitely a big focus of what we want to do. And certainly Director Douglas's strategy is one thing we're contemplating about, these parcel tax levies and things like that. Or there could be other solutions as well. So, but it's one aspect of it. Yeah.
Thank you.
So this is an interesting slide now, but so we're proposing an increase 3.69, all of which will go into the reserve. Plus 140,000.
That's correct.
Right.
And that's to deal with the, dealing with the sludge when it gets dried and, continued.
Well, and
It's
the
a bit of a
potential
maintenance, it's a
wind
bit
up
of a
it.
maintenance reserve, yes.
Yeah. Cause I have my own, I don't have any problem with I agree with the philosophy, but linking it to the sewer fee increase is somewhat arbitrary. Cause they're very different operations.
Absolutely, yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's not enough money for us to worry about. Well, to make it 3.9%. Okay, great. Anything else? Councillor Bell, your microphone's on? No? No, no, okay. Great. Anything else?
Just maybe a motion that we
To
increase sewer
include the-
user
Include
fees,
these in the financial plan.
to include in the 5-year financial plan, yes.
Essentially, moved and seconded, so essentially the same as the last motion, except in respect of sewer and septic. Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you. You can take it down now.
Okay, so. Now we go to capital. And turn it over to Ms. Johnson. Hot seat.
I'm here today to provide Committee of the Whole with an updated capital and reserve list. We have provided the updated lists as attachments, and they can be found on pages 8 to 10 of your agenda. The changes have been noted in red print on the right-hand side of the changed capital item. So let's go through the changes as compared to the last time this list was presented to the committee, looking at page 8. Under parks, there are 3 projects with changes. The park playground improvements. Previously, this project of $275,000 was budgeted to be funded in full from the capital reserve with the potential for funding from the Housing Accelerator Fund. We have revised the funding source to be $100,000 from the capital reserve, and the additional $175,000 will be incurred if we obtain funding from the Housing Accelerator Fund. The Friendship Park washroom renewal. The portion of this project that was previously budgeted to be funded from the Growing Community Fund of $102,862 has been changed and will now be funded from the capital reserve. And the Kinnickinnick Well, this project of $100,000 that was budgeted to be funded from the Growing Community Fund has been deferred to 2025 or a later date.
Can I ask, would you prefer questions as we're going through, or do you want to wait and do your presentation?
Let's wait.
You wait?
That's okay.
We'll,
Yeah.
we'll wait?
We'll do
Okay,
all-
we'll
yeah.
wait.
Is that all right?
Yep. That okay with council?
Okay, under facilities, the non-potable fill station at Dusty Road. This project of $200,000, which was also budgeted to be funded from the Growing Community Fund, has also been deferred to 2025 or a later date. Under IT, the IT server room upgrades. This project of $45,000 was previously budgeted to be funded from the COVID BC Safe Restart funding and will now be funded from the capital reserve. IT security enhancements. Previously, this project of $7,500 was budgeted to be funded in full from the COVID BC Safe Restart funding. $2,500 will still be funded from that source, and now $5,000 will be funded from the capital reserve. Under drainage, the Chapman Creek Flood Mitigation Phase 1 project of $400,000 has been deferred to 2025 or a later date. Under roads, the Sandy Hook Road Repair Project of $100,000 was originally budgeted to be funded from the Growing Community Fund and will now be funded from the capital reserve. And the Mermaid Street Rehabilitation Project of $500,000 that was originally budgeted to be funded from the Growing Communities Fund with potential for funding from the Housing Accelerator Fund will now no longer proceed unless we get the Housing Accelerator Fund or funding from another grant source. And under sidewalks and walkways, the Jasper Road sidewalk from Mills Road to Norwest Bay Road project of $400,000 that was originally budgeted to be funded from the Growing Communities Fund with potential for funding from the Housing Accelerator Fund will now also no longer proceed unless we get the Housing Accelerator Fund or funding from another grant source. So in total, the capital project list has been reduced by 1.6 million from 9,942,500 down to 8,342,500 if you factor out the Mermaid Street and Jasper Road projects that were dependent on receiving grant funding.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if there's any questions.
All right, council. What do you want to go first? Yes, please. Please, Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you through the chair. I'm just wondering, some of the changes were from the COVID funding we had, and I just wondered kind of why that was changed and where that money might be used. Maybe you have other ideas where it should go. Thank you.
The COVID funds would be fully expired with this plan. Yeah. We had a couple reports come to council just before Christmas utilizing COVID funds. So we had to just make a small adjustment here.
Right, but I mean, we still, based on the projections, how much it'll be fully utilized? COVID restart?
Yes.
And is that the case with the Growing Communities Fund as well, based on this?
So the Growing Communities Fund was one that we were asked to look at not spending a lot of. And so you should note that many of the projects that were funded from the Growing Communities Fund were either pushed out or we changed those funding sources to the capital reserve. So at this point, you'd be looking at only utilizing 850,000 from the Growing Communities Fund, which would still leave just over $2 million in that fund at the end of the year.
Right, thank you. That was going to be the next question. So that's where I'm curious. I don't know that it's quite, I'm curious why you would think of the first one, Kinnickinnick Well. we're gonna push that to 2025. It's not because of lack of funding. There's another, because we have the money available.
Yeah, there's a process to be able to drill a well, obviously, and that process hasn't started. We're not so sure we'll get through that process within a year. So this project can come back, at a future date. With either the same funding source or a different one.
And I suppose in theory, it could come back in 6 months if there was some-
Absolutely.
and then we'd seek to modify the financial plan.
Correct.
I just want to emphasize that to council. It's not a lack of money. It's actually perhaps a lack of resources or prioritizing staff time on which are the more important projects.
That's correct.
Councilor Tom.
Thank you. And I recall we had a fair conversation about trying to hold back some of that growing community fund and not spending it all in 1 year. So I appreciate that. With regards to the Kinnickinnic well, recognizing that, we likely can't drill a well, license a well, construct the distribution for it, get it all operational online in 1 year. If staff do have any capacity for any of the pre-work that needs to be done for that, is there any funding that they would anticipate needing to do that work? Like, we're pushing it to 2025, but are we pushing the start of that process to 2025? Or should we be allocating $30,000 this year to allow them to start that work so that we can look at it properly next year? Thanks.
Little negotiations going on right now.
Thank you for the question, through the chair. We're just trying to figure out which pot of money we can get that from. So we do have, engineering, design, permitting and, engagement money. It's, meant to seed, future years projects. So Kinnickinnic is, not being canceled, it's being deferred. So technically a future year project. I don't see why we can't use that money to, do some pre-engineering design work, have to fit that in with staff schedule, but maybe a desktop hydrogeological study or something of that nature could be done this year in advance of something that council wants to move forward in future years. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's why I wanted to highlight this. This is priority discussions, not financial ones. So if we think we should be moving on any of these this year, I think then you'd have to come back and say, well, that we don't have enough staff for that. But I'd like to have that conversation about some of these projects because I think some of them may be more important, including the Kinnickinnic well. Get on with it as fast as we can. Councilor McLaughlin.
Yes, thank you through the chair. I did go through the projects in terms of seeing what the capital projects, what parts of the strategic plan they were relating to in terms of priorities. And then I also looked at the detail, which is also on page 8 and 9 of our handout for the budget of what we expect as a council to focus on. And a lot of these items don't really reflect the things we want to focus on in the strategic plan. Now, that's not really a big criticism because we've just kind of adopted the strategic plan, but I think this kind of putting off some of the major projects helps us get time to review them more, to look and see how we might be able to refine them in terms of our strategic plan. And some important part of our strategic plan is doing more, water issues and cooperating and consulting SCRD and trying to come up with a water strategy. So that's raw water and tap water are both part of that equation. And so I think this gives us an opportunity to do that. So I'm glad that we are kind of waiting. I don't think we should press ahead too quickly because we haven't really done that consultation. Thank you.
Okay, so anything on specifics, council? Have the details, the explanations. We use the term grants and contributions. Is that essentially community amenity contributions? Giving you what you. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it would just be grants, not community amenity funds.
else, please? Councillor Tom.
Thank you. Looking at the Chapman Creek flood mitigation one, I know I spoke quite harshly against it previously. And I appreciate pushing it back to 2025. Recognizing the, winter we've had so far, we're probably in pretty good shape for 2024. It's still identified as growing community fund. Our staff looking to other funding sources that might be eligible for this for federal or provincial flood mitigation grants. Thanks.
Climate adaptation funding? Yes.
Absolutely. The ones that we're pushing out they won't show in the 2024 year. They'll be showing in the 2025 year. And they may not include these funding sources in that year. No.
How do we keep track of that? After this round, whatever the Chapman Creek flood mitigation wouldn't appear in this budget document. But how do we internally keep track, make sure that actually gets addressed?
So what we'll be doing, our next step is to create a version 2 of the 2024 budget. And then immediately thereafter, start the 5-year financial plan, which will include a 5-year capital plan, and it'll be in that listing for 2025.
Great, thank you. I knew the answer, but. Okay. So yes, Councillor McLaughlin, see you waving.
Thank you through the chair. Just as we move forward and consider the capital plan items, I was just wondering, how is the asset management plan coming? Because to me, that should inform, I've been waiting for it. And I'm also kind of a capital planner, so that's how I think, that's how I like to work. I think we should have at least a draft or something to go by for the asset management, so we know which projects and utilities to focus on and prioritize. Of course, critical items have to be addressed, but we can maybe avoid some critical items and make some trade-offs if we have that plan and can work with it. Another thing I would like to see is a climate adaptation plan, to just say any project that we think might be climate related as part of climate adaptation or part of funding we should use to repair something. I think that's a bit of an assumption. Like some of the things we will need to not do. We will need to retreat, and we'll need to focus on what needs to be done to protect the aspects of this community and take a real broad look at that and narrow it down to specifics, because I think the last summer we had and this winter shows we're not in the same situation we were 10 years ago. So to just carry on without a strategy, I think is not something I'm very comfortable with.
Can we just get answers to those first two?
Well, and there's a third one too, is the transportation plan. What transportation plan are we working with now? Do we have a new one that's going to come, or are we dealing with the 2009 transportation plan? Thank you.
Okay, so the first, sorry, I lost. Pass, thank you.
Hey, through the chair to Councillor McLaughlin. So first question, asset management. So asset management consists of various asset management plans and therefore unique classes of assets. So we're building each asset management plan for each class of assets. So the first one is the Water Resource Center. So we're almost 90% complete that one. So that will be our first plan. We have a building facilities plan. That's the next plan. We are using a road condition assessment from 2015 to inform our pavement management or our pavement rehabilitation program. Some of these plans are old and they're outdated. So there's not specifically one overarching asset management plan for the whole district, but every component has an asset management plan and we're building those out for assets. So conceivably, when you look at the budget book, you'll see our asset report cards, which show the state of our asset classes. And so each one of those should have an asset management plan too that feeds into that. So we're building those out. It takes time. It's a marathon, not a sprint. The other thing, and I just mentioned this, it might complicate the rollout of these plans is with the passage of Bill 44, we have to do a lot of work on our studies too, because, you know, potentially you could have a lot that has a single house on it, could have a fourplex, right? So now we're also focusing on things like our drainage master plan, sanitary sewer modeling. So we might have to in the years be ready for any anticipated changes from Bill 44. So at that time, we might want to focus actually more on our long-term planning and engineering. So because of that, we might have to reorder and prioritize the order in which we do some of these asset management plans. So we have the WRC going and we'll fit in more as we good. But this is more of a kind of a reminder to, I guess, council is that because of Bill 44, in future budget years, we might be looking more at our long-term engineering planning because there's implications for infrastructure with Bill 44. Thank you.
Okay, just staying with that. So in the absence of Bill 44, we've got Water Resource Center and our buildings, the AROs or the asset management reports. Anything else in 2024?
Nothing for an asset management plan,
Right.
specifically, but there's a drainage master plan, which would inform a drainage asset management plan at some point.
So other ones,
Yeah.
Roads or, as you say, we're working on an old plan to.
Yeah.
But so part of the answer, part of it'll be done this year. Part of what you're asking for, but not all of it by any means. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, I guess what it might take is a little bit of visioning and a different way of planning. Like my way of approaching it might be to just do some draft plans, estimate, because we have so many moving aspects and elements and targets that it's kind of like almost scenario planning rather than saying, we're going to get this plan done and then we're going to do that plan and that plan and that plan. That works in a normal growth environment, but I think in our situation, we're just getting bogged down with trying to do all this infrastructure planning, but not really getting too much out of it. It's unfortunate because it's a lot for a small municipality to do.
So let's just stay, so this is asset management. We'll talk about adaptation plans in a
Well,
minute. and
they're all
transfer.
related
Hang on,
because-
but I want to give them the chance to answer that. So Mr. Dillon gave us the asset management response. That some of it's going to be done this year and some of it will take longer, and Bill 444 may complicate everything. Fair comment?
Yes.
Yeah. So now do you want to comment on Councillor McLaughlin's questions about climate adaptation and how that factors into the work that you've got planned this year?
As we do new master plans, climate adaptation is a consideration in those new master plans. So when we look at the drainage master plan for next year, it's going to be in light of trends in precipitation and the changing climate. So there's always a climate lens on those new master plans. And in terms of a broader climate action plan, that's not something we're working on right now, but you know, we are kind of doing it in bits and pieces. So last summer we had our student come and present, look through all their bylaws and have a kind of an action plan on how we can look at those through the climate lens and tweak our bylaws. So in the absence of, you know, direction on creating a formal action plan, we are taking it on in bits and pieces.
Right. And for example, are we going to try and get another summer student this year? Two. Okay. Right. Okay. So those are by way of answers. And then the last was the transportation master plan. Microphone's not, sorry.
Through the chair again, the transportation master plan is about 90% complete. Understand that the last discussion I had with the manager of sustainable infrastructure is that we're hoping to present something to council in the next 2 or 3 months. So I think the consultant is just a little bit behind on the delivery there, but we want to get that concluded. Until such time, though, the Transportation Master Plan for 2009 is still the one that's in effect and the one we refer to.
Okay, thank you. Council, do you want to respond?
Yeah, for instance, to follow up, we had some street improvements proposed for Mermaid, and it's called a collector road there. So I looked on our 2009 plan. It's just a local road. So I'm wondering, are we getting the cart before the horse here? So, yeah, thank you.
And yes, okay. You want to comment on that?
So in the, excuse me, through the Chair, so the question to clarify is, in the capital, it's shown as, the plan is shown as a collector road. I believe the upgrade dates on Mermaid also have to do with sanitary and bringing the road up to standards, and I would have to look at that. That might be something that was mislabeled in the plan, but as of now, if 2009 master plan says it's a local road, that's what it is, a local road. But I can't say at this time whether the 2023 is labeled it as a collector road. I haven't looked at the draft document myself.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so, that's fine. I just think, you know, I live in the village. I think people in the village, these are our streets, our local streets. So there's potential for projects there, but I think we need to know whether they're collector roads and it's for traffic or whether they're local roads and should be designed mostly for pedestrians and you know, use trails and such. So I just, I think we need to maybe research some of these projects in more detail and I'd like
Okay.
time to do that. Thank you.
And I think that's what we're going to hear in the next 2 or 3 months. The consultant's report on that. So at that point, we'll be able to debate whether we think it's properly labeled.
Well, I don't think you should rely on consultants' reports to tell us that. I think you should consult the community. And that's what I'm asking for. Thank you.
Right. And I think that's when sorry, please go ahead.
Sorry, I just have some late breaking info on climate stuff too, is that we are working on a regional flood hazard project, which will look at coastal related impacts from climate change as well. We're participating in that as well. So just got a note from our manager of sustainable infrastructure on that.
Would they be listening in on this meeting?
Yes, they watch.
Okay, regional, does that mean we're doing it in collaboration with the SCRD?
SCRD and the town of Gibsons, I believe, and my understanding is Shashelle Nation has done their own. So they're not a participant in this, but we are collaborating with other local governments on that regional flood hazard project.
Okay, so that goes back to part of your second question of adaptation work. Yep, thank you. And thank the manager of sustainability. Councillor Bell?
Through the chair, mine is just around emergency preparedness. You know, again, just around mitigation, that kind of thing. We've talked about that. We've talked about it this year a little bit in terms of what keeps me awake at night is not knowing what our emergency preparedness plan is. Now, I know that part of that is happening in the SCRD. I don't know what the status of that is, but for example, you know, living in Tewanik and having a fire out there just recently is a great concern. And I mean, if that would have happened in the summer, I think things would have been dire. And I'm hearing more and more people now from the community talking about their concern around fire. And when the fire chief comes out and is concerned about Tewanik as well. Now, I'm just giving that as an example. But where does that fit into our responsibility in terms of Tewanik is the district of Sechelt, Sandy Hook, et cetera? How do we address that? How do we listen to those concerns? And where are they in our plan? How do we start to discuss these? Quite frankly, I'm really concerned about fire in the future. And I think the numbers that we heard about what it cost us this year in terms of just overall, in terms of fire, was just horrendous. And I'm quite concerned about some of the communities, more so of in Tewanik. But again, just want to sort of focus and prioritize, because that's what, so my question is, where are we at with that? Where does it fit into the big plan in terms of the communities that are within the district?
Where does it fit into the
Our plan,
district of
yeah.
Seychelles plans? Okay, thank you. I see microphone on, so I'll hazard a
Great.
guess that Mr. Yates is going to
Yeah, I'll,
answer.
I'll try to help you out. We don't have a particular department or a particular staff member devoted to emergency preparedness. We have a number of us who over the years have taken part in the regional district program when we could or when it was happening. We've also contributed in with funds or making application for grant money to do various studies, and that's where the Tawanik evacuation study came from. There's also been a number of changes at the regional district over their structuring. I think that's greatly improved now. And I think there's a little bit more to come that Councillor Toth might be able to give you more specifics on, but they've been rearranging that department. We are looking to restart a regional staffing committee to deal with where do we go forward on the planning. A year or more ago, the province requested that jurisdictions review their hazard risk assessments. So that's another thing that we need to do regionally. And by risk assessment, that's everything. That's fire, flood, landslides, all of these sorts of things. So you'd come up with a mitigation program. 4 years ago, maybe now, we did commission a consultant to provide us with a emergency response plan that our staff could implement for various situations. So we do have that. Quite a number of our staff have various levels of emergency preparedness training through the Justice Institute and other outfits. Not everybody wants to tell you what their qualifications are, just they don't always want to do it. But we have those. But we also have the ability to call on our regional partners for an emergency operations center when something comes up, and that would bring in a greater number of staff and expertise to try and work on a particular given situation. So that's kind of where we're at. There is some planning work to do, some consulting work that needs to get done, and we need to fire up the groups that work on responding. That's another area. Doing tabletop exercises with that emergency operations center crew is a really important thing to do. And I think now that the regional district has a full-time coordinator, is that the title, I think?
Manager,
No, the
top manager, I think.
the new lady.
Yes.
Yeah. We should be able to get back on that program of doing those, and that's critical to keep people activated and energized on that front. So, yeah. That
Thank you.
helps.
That's great.
So
And-
does that within us, we're on the edges of this all over it, but we don't actually have a core budget item or process that we follow. Would that be fair?
No, we don't have a budget, but we do have our own resiliency to handle certain situations on our own to a point.
Right.
Or we would call a greater group if we felt it was outside of our abilities
Mhm.
or capacity.
Thank you. Councillor Bell to continue and then.
Yeah, so I guess that's just part of my thinking around just, looking at this as something that at some point we need to look at budgeting, other things. I see the Community Safety Committee fitting into this because that's about safety as well in the long run. But I think also, I think it's as we move forward, and this is great to know that we've done so much, is I think the community needs to know more about what we're doing. Because so there needs to be, I would like to see a community engagement piece in there when we're ready. We're not ready right now. But I think it's just a great opportunity that people feel that they've, their fears can be somewhat, lessened, if you like, if they know that we've got a lot of these things going on. But the question is, a lot of people don't know what we're doing right
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I guess the question is that something that we would ask our staff to do? Or is it something we'd want to ask the SCRD, or the emergency management organization over there? So maybe we can wait. I know Councillor Toth wants to ask a question, but Councillor McLaughlin was first.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. I was just speaking to somebody over the break and they were saying that, maybe members of the previous council know about this. There was somebody who was kind of identified before COVID about becoming a resiliency organizer, contact person. He sort of started it. I don't know. I think there is a agency out there that we can do some neighborhood community organizing around that concept. So I just wonder if there's any background on that. No? No.
Your turn.
Thank you. It's funny because there was actually a release that came out from the regional district yesterday that I missed, where the Sunshine Coast Emergency Program is seeking emergency support service volunteers from all electoral areas and all municipalities on the coast to help with some of this work, providing assistance, providing support. It's primarily a response-based ESS, and that's through Nancy Hughes, who is the emergency, had it here, Sunshine Coast Emergency Program Coordinator. That's her title. And yeah, there has been a lot of beefing up of the emergency services and protective services department at the regional district in the last couple of years. As we know, or may not remember, EMBC last year became EMCR. So it actually became its own ministry within the province, emergency management. And some of that is going to include additional requirements for municipalities, for regional districts to beef up their emergency services responses. And it's going to require more coordination and less siloing. And I know that siloing is the last thing you want to have happen in an emergency. Everybody's got to be playing from the same book. Those updates to the hazard conditions, you know, that's the fire, the earthquake, the flooding, it's chemical spills. Up until a couple of years ago, well, up until last year, Selma Park had to worry about chlorine gas from the Chapman treatment plant. But they've actually moved to on-site chlorine generation. So it's not going to be a hazard for them anymore. You know, just to add on, it's not something that we've got a direct control over. You know, we also don't directly control the fire department. So I don't know where the fire department fits in with this. It might be worth checking. I don't participate in the emergency planning at the regional district, so I don't know how tied in they are. But you know, when I look at a community like Tawanik or Sandy Hook, or you know, even my own backyard, if people haven't fire smarted their own properties, they can't expect government to solve the problem for them. And it sounds harsh, but it's kind of true. I mean, I had a bark mulch fire in my own property last year. And that made me realize I'm not ready either. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. We have to do better, but we all have to do better. It can't just be government do it. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Just to close the loop, the question from Councillor Bell was, I think, do we ask the emergency management to explain their plans for Seashell? I think the answer is yes.
Yeah, I actually had a question to come out of that. I just didn't get to it before I ran out of breath. As elected, we form part of the policy group when it comes to emergency operations centers and emergency planning. You know, our job is not to be out there fighting a fire or evacuating people hands-on. I know that our staff are getting all this EOC training and things like that. Is there programming, this might be a question for the CAO, maybe nobody has the answer today. Is there programming that is available for elected officials to help us better understand our role in emergency planning, our role in an emergency situation? I know last council, we had a particular issue that we were unprepared for. And now I think about, you know, fire and evacuation planning, and I'm not sure as a member of council if I would still know what to do. Thanks.
I think the answer is yes, we should be approaching the emergency management coordinator.
Yeah,
Mr.
the answer
Yates.
is yes. The JI Institute offers a whole host of courses, and they also offer targeted sessions that, you know, they'll create just for you. So if Seashell or the regional district elected officials wanted to get a seminar on specific things, they would do that.
Should be at LGLA. Counselor Bell. you know.
Through the chair, one other comment, back on, the Fire Smart programs.
Mm.
I totally agree that we need to be, responsible. However, there's still a lot of communities that don't know about Fire Smart. And although it is starting to show up in the paper and so on, there needs to be more information out there, more communication. And, since since the fire happened in Twanik, there's been a lot of discussion with the community. And so I'm already putting the word out about Fire Smart programs, what's available. We need to start in our own community to become Fire Smart. So I think just to add to that, that is part of the strategy, is that our community associations can play a really big part in this. And because we need to, as I say, talk to the people in the community to get behind. And that will help us in terms of what we want to accomplish is becoming more prepared. Building. So I'd like to see that as part of the strategy. Whatever that
Okay.
looks like. We could talk more about that, Councillor Shepherd, in terms of maybe that becomes a presentation or something for our community associations. Great.
That came out of the blue. Okay, can I go back to page 10? I think that's where we were when we started talking about all this.
I know. Oh, my God.
And this is the state of our reserves projected to the end of this year. Council, I suggest personally, this is among the most important pages in the whole budget process. It's our rainy day fund. It's our strategic fund to anticipate inevitable requirements of asset replacement or unexpected things. So if you haven't done so, please have a very careful look at this. I'll entertain questions. While we're waiting for you guys, I'll ask one. We have, under this non-statutory, we have a reserve for committed expenditures. I'm curious, sorry, I should have given you a heads up, but what, if it's committed, why are we not spending it within the 2 years? Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Johnson.
Most of what's in there, a lot of times is if we don't spend all of a project's budget in 1 year, we put it into that account and then we fund it out of that account in the next year. So it's kind of like a holding account and most of the stuff just goes in and comes out in the next year.
Right, well, no, and that's what I would expect, but I don't see it coming, we started.
There are a
at
few things in there that we're sort of like putting a little bit, like I know that there's some sewer expenses where we put a little bit in every year and every 4 years we fund it out of that account.
Right,
So there are some more cumulative projects in there, but most of them are in and out. I'd have to take a look in the account to
Okay,
see which one didn't come out.
because it's $300,000 that's sitting there and I take your point of little
Yeah.
bits and pieces from prior projects, that's great. But
This is typically a year-end account that we just use over the year end. And
over the year.
so what we do is it should be at zero during the year. And then at year end, we have, so Mr. Allen, he doesn't use all his OCP money. So
Yeah, right.
you will transfer that into this committed
Mhm.
and that project will continue in the next year.
Right, in
Right.
which case it would
And
come
so
out
then
in the
we,
next year.
we drain it the next year.
Right,
However, there's a few minor items like the what do you call those bulbs at the WRC? The UV lights we buy every 4 years,
Mhm.
so we put, let's just say, $18,000 or $20,000 a year into that committed account, and then in the fourth year
Yeah.
it's drained.
no, I get it for the sewer reserve, but
Yeah.
ironically, we're down to zero essentially for that, but down lower, we're keeping the 300,000.
We'll look at that over the
Please.
next month to make sure that's correct.
And then 2 lines below, crime programming reserve, given our community safety program, I covet those monies for doing some good works. Is there any limitation on what we could spend that money on?
Sorry, did you say the community safety reserve?
No, I said the community crime programming reserve, 918, last 3 digits.
No, I don't think, it's just for what? There's no definition to it. It's really a surplus account. There's
Yeah.
no bylaw associated. But it would be to, to go towards crime prevention or,
Right,
Yeah.
so in other words.
Yep.
I wasn't actually being flippant when I
Nope.
said I covet it. If there's some initiative, whether it's more security or more lighting or whatever else we're talking about, it could be funded from that. Cool. Oh, Donna's slate's always on.
Okay.
Except when it's not. All right, I'll carry on. 928, I'm using the last 3 digits of your reserve numbers, which is the public safety reserve. And this is the one that concerns me, council, because we're draining our reserves for this. Not wrong, but I'd like to understand the plan to get them back up. I mean, the big chunk of this is the building maintenance.
Yep, so the only money that has been going in here is any savings from the RCMP contract. And so it is built up over a number of years and the previous council wanted to make sure any money that's spent out of that is going towards either the facility around the justice or the courthouse or RCMP or issues around RCMP. So 1 year we funded an additional member there from that fund. And then now we're funding roof repairs out of that fund.
Right. Is it just the roof over there? It's not,
Yeah, so I think 2 years ago we did the RCMP roof and then this year we're doing the courthouse roof.
right. So that we're. Okay.
So
it's not-
that's the
it's not
big
this-
reason
it's
it's
not
been
this
drained.
Building. yeah.
No, not this building, no.
So we're draining it, which is okay. Because it's a one-time, hopefully 20 or 30-year fix.
Yeah, for the big items, for
Yeah.
sure.
Are
Yeah.
we gonna pay for the parking lot realignment?
We haven't got that far on that project yet.
Thank you. Everybody know, back up the 923, everybody know what the SCIF reserve is? Full disclosure, I don't remember. Ms. Johnson?
Sorry, that was for the Small Community Investment Fund. We get a grant from that. And so at one point that was put into the reserve. We just never spent it.
So it's essentially unencumbered at this point, that'd be fair?
I'm gonna say yes, but I would have to, if we want to spend it, just try to dig some information up on it. That one's well before my time, so I don't know the
Right.
exact history on it, but if we wanted to look at spending it, I would then go back and look at some of the history and
Well,
bring it forward.
I am looking at spending it, so maybe you'd like to go back and please. Okay. Anything else, folks? Please.
Thank you. Fund 38, which is the Legacy Fund Reserve. I know we'd had a conversation about this recently, and that account, that reserve does accrue interest sitting there for the regional district. I'm just wondering,
The District Seashell?
well, it's a District of Sechelt held reserve,
Hmm.
so it's accruing interest for the District of Sechelt.
Right.
My understanding is it's supposed to stay within the reserve. I'm
Yeah, I
just
agree.
wondering
I
if
agree.
that's the case and how much we typically earn
Mhm.
in a year in interest on that. Thank you.
Yep. Good pickup.
Yes, so the interest, it does earn interest and the interest does go back into the reserve and stays in the reserve. And without council motion, the funds stay in the reserve.
But this isn't showing anything in 2023 coming in. I think that's Councillor Toth's point. We'd expect it to be increasing a little bit for interest.
Yeah, we have not, so that number will be populated when we go through year end. So, but it's gaining, you know, the same interest rate as any of our reserves at this point. So I think we're just over 5%.
$1,000. Yep. All right, so that'll be captured on year end. Okay. I think that's for information. Which page?
That page, but if we're happy with the capital, maybe we could have a motion on the capital.
Can we do that? Oh. Mhm.
Thank you. I see that the recommendation on page 6 is that the proposed changes be included. But then there's a following one, which is that staff be directed to prepare the required financial plan and tax rate bylaws.
Mhm.
And I just wanted to make sure that before any motion got made, that staff are still happy with the tax rate bylaws being in here. If we haven't had the conversation on residential versus commercial, and if there's anything still to come that might preclude tax rate bylaws. Thanks.
I think it's fine to be in here, but I hear what you're saying, because our next cut at the roll might show a little different numbers, but you know, we kind of wait for that anyway.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So it's, to prepare the draft financial plan and tax rate bylaws is probably what you're essentially asking for. So moved. Seconded. Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried. Yippee.
But just for council's knowledge, we're taking that as pre-approval on the capital so that things that we can get going on, we will start moving forward on with regards to the capital projects.
Okay, that's not quite what we voted on, but I understand the merits of getting on with things.
Yeah, if we wait till May for the bylaw, then we're really late in the game trying to organize capital. So if you feel comfortable with a different motion, then staff are open to that.
I went with what you were asking for, to put it into the financial plan. I guess I'd personally like to see the overall plan, which, well, let's talk about that. When is the next round 2 of the book, or version 2 of the budget book?
Version 2 of the book we'll start working on right away. But in the meanwhile, we'll start working on the 5-year financial plan as well.
Mhm.
The 5-year financial plan doesn't usually come to council till later in the game. With all the tax rate bylaws. But if you want to see it prior to that, you want to see the capital or everything prior to that?
No, but I guess my question was, when does the budget book version 2, when are you projecting that to come to council?
Although I don't have a day definition, we're starting to work on it right away.
I mean,
2
late.
weeks,
Yeah,
probably.
okay, so,
something like that. That would be version 2.
Right, okay.
And that would include the capital listing that we see here
Mhm.
for 2024. But yeah.
Okay.
Usually in January, when we're comfortable with the list, that's kind of our indication of pre-approval. We can start working on the planning of those projects.
Okay. Okay, so you've got the motions from us so far. All right, anything else? We voted to, in accordance with what was in the staff reports, that these various items be included in the 2024 to 2028, including the capital, but to be included in them. Director Douglas is saying he kind of likes, he'd like to get going based on it being approved, and I'm saying that's not what I voted on, per se.
Okay, so then maybe we could get another motion that, that's, the financial, the budget, the, capital plan that shows here, that you're giving staff pre-approval on this list to get moving, to be able to start working on these projects.
Okay. Councilor McLaughlin.
Yes, thank you through the chair. I'm not really comfortable moving forward with like a over $10 million list of capital projects. I did review them over Christmas. And we will have the opportunity, if we want, to add capital projects later. But like I said, I think including some of the, as just a practice, some of the accelerator fund amounts and that is just, I mean, it's the numbers just seem, considering the financial issues people are facing and the reality of such a, we're still maybe going into a recession, we don't know, but people are really not gonna want to see, you know, I don't think people want to see this big of a budget from us. I actually developed a bit of a budget myself of about $2 to $3 million, which pared down a lot of things, but were the essential things based on what I could support through the strategic plan. Because I also think a lot of the projects are not really detailed enough to support a lot of the things we want in the strategic plan. And if we waited on those items, I think we could refine them and be more careful about what we choose to go ahead with. I mean, I totally respect the fact that the administration has, you know, their job to do, and they came forward with a list of projects that they thought were appropriate, and why not? But I just, I have that list I could pass around, but I just think it's too much today to say, yes, go ahead with all those items. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Shepherd.
I respect Councillor McLaughlin's view that, that it results in too high or it's, whether it's too much for staff to take on or too much taxation. But I really think it's incumbent upon Councillor McLaughlin then to come through the budget process and say, here's the $2 million that I think is appropriate spending. Because this is the first time I've heard it. And we are only at stage 2, but you know, come forward and tell us what projects, what capital items that staff have suggested she doesn't approve and what she would approve. I think that would be helpful. Thanks.
And I'll offer on your behalf that that wasn't requested today, so please.
Yes, I do have a list, and I did analyze them, and I realized, you know, some of the things I'll have in my comments are not things that are generally supported, but I wanted, like you say, to show you my thinking, because this is what we're here for, to debate, to consider, and it's a lot to undertake, but I did want to look through our strategic plan and try and direct it that way. And I think that's just something that I could offer as a opinion and service or whatever, take it or leave it kind of thing. But I just think that's important in terms of how I see my contribution here. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? I'm coming at it a little different in that I'm not supportive of giving approval today because we weren't asked for it. And we've been given a lot of information in the presentation, but I really didn't put that much time into this to make a absolute final decision on, could I agree to proceed with this or that, because I wasn't asked for it. So I'm very, you know, if you're going to be able to come back to us in a couple of weeks, then I would favor having this fulsome discussion at that point on, are we in fact okay with what amounts to 6% or 8% or a 12% increase.
So the motions I got today, I'm going to do a lot of work to prepare a five-year financial plan based on the motions that I received today. And so, including the capital list. So it would have been, I think, appropriate when we were going through the capital list to hear of any changes that council would like to see to that. As we are into January and, you know, building season starts for us by May, if not before that. So what am I bringing back in 2 weeks? If I'm coming back in 2 weeks, that would be different than today.
Well, I think you're coming back, I assume, with the stuff that was put up on the PowerPoint. The overall summary, where these are just the incremental pieces, then I'm not sure exactly how they all fit in. Other than I've seen a brief thing on this, on the PowerPoint. So that to me is what I'd like to see is the whole package together. And then we make that final call on, I'm not trying to slow down any of the rest of the process, but if you were looking for a full approval of these things, I didn't pick that up from the agenda.
So it's kind of the way it went last year that once we had approval of the capital list, that was the list that we are to start moving forward on. And so I tried to confirm that after you made the motion, as we kind of did last year. And the year prior. So for us, it's a timing of getting going. The longer we wait, the less contractors that are available to us. And so that's why we're asking this to be a pre-approved list, because we have a lot of work to get towards.
Councillor Toth.
Thank you. Sure, there are items on here that I would love to take off, but I don't really have any reason to. When we look at this list, like, we've got buildings that are rotting into the ground, we've got assets that are rotting into the ground. We're risking sewage spills with a number of things. You know, there's a couple of nice to haves in here, but they're being proposed to be funded from grants. We don't get the grant, we don't do it. So I don't really see the problem with moving forward today. Thanks.
Okay, and I'm not referencing the capital, I'm commenting on the overall budget.
The question was about the capital plan.
Is that true? You're not going to proceed with hiring?
Well, the 12-month person, I think we might have, but the 6 and 8, no.
Yes, Councilor McLaughlin.
Yes, thank you to the sheriff. Good comment. I guess one of my concerns too is a lot of these projects are multi-year projects. And there's like large kind of general amounts of money, sometimes speculated year after year. I don't have enough detail to say that that's supportive. And, you know, and if we approve those projects, well, it's done. Like, our term is over, we can't change that. Those are just going to go through ahead year after year. And that really concerns me because it doesn't give us a chance to actually incorporate our strategic plan in a meaningful way for these major projects, which shape and create a lot of what Seashield's going to be in the next 5 years. So, yeah, I'm at a loss. And I did request that a table come to me early with the strategic plan priorities listed, and it didn't come, so I did it myself. It takes time to do that. I spent numerous days developing this. So I did it as soon as I could. And, you know, it'd be nice to have the place to discuss all this, but frankly, we don't really have that opportunity. We come to this table and we don't have time to go through each project and talk about the kind of detail that I like to talk about. So that's why I put it in a big spreadsheet based on David Douglas's spreadsheet that is part of our budget here in Excel, which is quite a job considering there's some things in there that are not something easily formatable and such, because he's got a pretty complicated spreadsheet. I found out. Thank you.
So at every budget meeting, we have the opportunity to talk about any level of detail that we want to talk about. And at the end of every section, we ask, is there any other questions or comments? And we don't hear any. We feel that we're fine to start moving forward. So if that's changing, then we need to know that, right? And we need to know that not after we get the motion, but before we make a motion to incorporate all these things into a 5-year financial plan, because it's a lot of work for me to go through that. We have 3 staff that are involved. We prepare a 5-year financial plan. We make sure all the reserves balance. We make sure all the numbers balance to find out that we're going to have a major crop back of capital that doesn't necessarily work for staff's timing.
Yes, I just recall last year that we took the initial look at the budget. We didn't really compare it to the strategic plan because we didn't really have a different one anyway. So I guess you were just going with what was known to administration at the time. And we had basically found it was a 20% increase, and we whittled that down to 7. That included a 3% reserve. So we did do changes. And so I was hoping to have that opportunity here today, and or this year, and that's what I've been working towards, because I just don't think the way the economy is, the way the limited number of tax bills we can put out here can just have such a ambitious, I think, request. And certainly I highlighted to address Councillor Toth's issues. I highlighted definitely the ones that were emergency and essential that do have to be done. But there's a lot of things that I don't think have to be done at this point and deserve more discussion. So I know not all council members are going to support me on this, but I just thought I'd put it out there because I can't just myself sit and not say my piece here. Thank you.
Very good. And I fully support you with that.
Through
Councillor
the
Bell.
chair, are we concerned about the increase that's being proposed at this point? Is this about the tax rate? Or so if that's the case, and I don't know if it can be as specific as that, is if we need to work with a number that we give staff to come back with, maybe that's what we need to look at. I don't know if we're at that, but I'm just putting it out there.
Right, Councillor Rowe? Yes.
What's the motion on the table? What are we actually talking about here? Because what I've seen, or what I think I've seen, is that we have moved everything we've been talking about into the plan with the motion that was prior to the motion that's on the table. So what are we actually debating right now?
We don't have a motion
We
as
don't.
such.
We
but-
don't?
But
We do have a
we
motion on the
do, we
table.
did get seconded too.
The motion is that the capital list that's being provided is, that staff can basically get working on moving forward on those capital projects. For 2024.
All right, so
Okay.
maybe we can ask, so we are clear, because it's a very appropriate question. What is the motion?
The motion on the floor that has currently been moved and seconded is that the proposed changes to the provisional budget, updated capital list and reserve list be included in the 2024 to 2028 financial plan, and that staff be directed to prepare the required financial plan and tax rate bylaws.
I think we voted on that one. So this is an ad lib motion at the moment about pre-approval. Councillor Toth.
I can't remember what it was.
Which is why your question.
Maybe we can go back to the tapes.
Basically that, the capital list as presented be given pre-approval.
Yes.
Only capital. Yeah, so that is your motion too. Thank you. So, did you want to continue?
Well, first of all, I appreciate Councillor McLaughlin's work ethic and the time that she's put in on this, but we just moved all these items. We just passed a motion, spent time discussing these, and I guess I would have thought that that would have been the time to bring it up. However, that being said, I wonder if council would be, and probably not, but I guess I'm wondering if there'd be an appetite of moving forward just the capital, just the items that don't relate to taxation, or if, is there a happy medium we can come to? Otherwise, I think we should just vote on the motion that's on the floor.
There's a difference between the capital and the operating, because what we've been presented is the proposed all-in. So I accept that it's different than my concerns about the operating, because we've only seen the incremental items in the operating today. Having said that, in terms of what you've just said, Councillor Rowe, things that you want to get going on right now, what is on capital? What are the most pressing things that you're in the next 2 or 3 weeks that you want to get started on?
I don't have that list in front of me. Usually once we get the capital project approval, then we we're able to start working on it. So we were looking for a motion to that effect.
So you don't have a particular, there's not a burning issue that somebody's waiting to give you a proposal in the next week or?
No, it's not a
RFP?
matter of a burning issue
Yeah.
that we have to get a particular project
Mm.
finished 2 weeks from today. It's a matter we can't get started on planning for any of these projects or wasting our time planning for any of these projects if in fact they're
Yeah.
not going to go.
Well, it's
So the
true.
longer that takes,
Yep.
then some projects won't happen this year at all.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, please.
Thank you through the chair. Yeah, I was just going to add that if we do reduce the number of projects and go forward with the ones that are essential, the planning for those could go ahead right away. But also, we had $13 million when we first started the budgeting process that were carryovers from last year, $13 million worth of projects. So there is work underway. There is work that will be done. And I'm sure some of that's been done, but frankly, that was an astonishingly large number to me at that point. And so we had a lot of projects we approved last year and they're carrying over to this year. So I think there is work to be done. And I just thought it would be better to really scrutinize these projects more in terms of our strategic plan, in terms of hopefully some resiliency. I don't see, community concerns. I don't really see that reflected in the projects coming forward, even though they might have been identified as such as a priority from the strategic plan and the pull down menus on the actual templates you use for the projects. I would like to see more due diligence on that. I realize, there was an attempt to do that there, but it isn't sufficient for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure. Councillor Bill, sorry, can you turn your microphone? Yeah, thank you. Councillor Director Douglas.
So trying to wrap this up then, today is the day to respond to any capital adjustments that we wanted to make. And otherwise, what are we doing? We're just delaying this process. And I didn't hear any questions or any comments toward reducing it to a different amount or for staff to come back with a new list reduction. So certainly staff can go away and come back at a future meeting asking for pre-approval. I would just like to know what we're bringing back, that's all. And we can bring that to the next council meeting.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Shepherd.
Just to address that, my comments to council, is there any objection to moving ahead with the capital items presented in this latest? Because I think I'm hearing objections more on the operational side. Councillor McLaughlin has broad-based objections to the number of capital items and the detail and so forth. But what is the majority of council will on this? I mean, are we willing to give staff approval to move ahead just on the capital items as presented?
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And my response to that is I didn't read this as the last time we would look at the capital items. So if we were to vote on this, it's ironic, but I would want to re-include Kinnikinnick Well, the Dusty Road reclaimed, there's 3 or 4 I'd like to put back in. And I thought, given all we were being asked for was, what do we include in the plan? And I assumed another chance to have that discussion. So that's why I'm hesitant to proceed.
And to respond to that, I think if I haven't misunderstood, I've heard from staff that they are willing to include other items going forward. But this just establishes the majority minimum that allows them to start the work on the 5-year plan. So
No, with that, but it also, you're looking for pre-approval to get going. Where essentially, there is no pre-approval. Once we approve it, it's approved.
well, then, sorry, is there objection from the majority of council on, there is on some of these items?
There is, yes. Yes, Councilor.
Yeah, thank you to the chair. Well, I would like to say I'm generally supportive of the operating budget.
Okay, but we're only talking about capital. here.
Well, but in terms of capital, perhaps I could provide my comments to counselors and to administration and see if they could at least comment back. It's a table, what their issues are. And perhaps that way we could bring it down to some lower level. Also, the Growing Communities Fund, I think we made that point before that we are not going to go back there and fund major projects with that money. That money needs to be kept in a reserve. And I think the one thing I'm concerned about is not dipping too much into our reserves. We're saying we need to have reserves, take 3% to add to our reserves every year, and then we're going to spend a lot of reserves, it seems. So in this budget, it's too much, I think, and we need to be more cautious, take a precautionary principle, which is the SCRD and Sechelt Nation approach on how we move forward. Thank you.
Councilor Bell.
Okay, through the chair. So just trying to kind of wrap this up
Yes,
a
I was
little.
going to say, I'll let you speak and anyone else, and then we'll call for the
Yeah,
question.
so now is the motion again that we're looking at supporting a pre-approval of the capital money to be able to go ahead and spend it. So that's what I'm hearing is on the table. Can we call a vote on that?
Mhm. Okay, so we're clear. So, because pre-approval is a term that confuses me. So I think essentially by approving it, this is becoming our capital plan. And it can be changed later. It could be, though, to be fair.
What is that?
Well, if something hasn't happened, in 6 months and we haven't started it, we can change our minds. Or we can add something, Councillor Shepherd's point is a good one. We can add a well in there later if we choose to. But it is an approval, I think. Correct me, but yeah. Okay, that clear? Everybody okay? Councillor Toth.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment that it's pre-approval because these things need to be in the 5-year financial plan by law. We're not giving bylaw readings today. So we have to give some approval to this capital plan if staff want to start on anything before we give bylaw readings. And I think that's where the pre-approval, because we're approving things before we've actually given the bylaw readings at the end of the day. And that's where we are today. And I'm perfectly content with that. One thing I did want to say, with the capital reserve, that capital reserve is to replace capital assets. We're not just building a fund to someday build a stadium or something like that. It's accrued to in order to expense it. And some years staff will spend less from that capital reserve, and some years staff will spend more from that capital reserve. It's the same thing with the Growing Community Fund. Yes, it's to fund infrastructure and things that are needed for a growing community. It's not a high interest savings account that's being provided by the province. So at some juncture, we do need to spend that money. Do we spend it all in 1 year? Yes or no? That's part of our debate. But at some point, all of that money will need to be spent. Thanks.
There's no time frame on that as we know it right now, is there? As to,
Not that I remember at this point.
okay, I mean, there,
I will look it up.
yeah. Okay, you ready for the question? All in favor, let's read it again, just to be clear.
Please correct me if I've heard any of the parts, that the 2024 provisional budget updated capital list as presented be given pre-approval to proceed for 2024 projects.
Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Councilors McLaughlin and me opposed. Motion carries. All right, anything else on? Finish the prepared agenda. Any other comments, staff want to make?
No, just thank you very much for the motions today.
Okay, great. Then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn and second.